So the first thing is that if you think you have an analytics problem, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, you don't have an analytics problem, you have a communication problem. So if the data isn't coming through, it's because something wasn't communicated correctly. If data stops coming, it's the stupidest problem in the world, because if the data came at one point and now it doesn't come anymore, the difference between those two is always just one single thing that was broken. Yeah. That could have been prevented by the simplest communicative and cooperative efforts. It's ridiculous.
Hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Overdrive Digital Podcast. If you enjoy this episode, as always, please do consider subscribing. You can find us on the usual places: SoundCloud, iTunes, Spotify, or go and check us out at overdrivedigital.co.uk. So today, I'm joined by Google Tag Manager, Google Analytics Specialist, Simo Ahava.
Nice.
Hi.
Hi. Well done.
And I got that right.
Well done with the name.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks for making the time and having me.
Cheers. Thanks for coming over to our house and checking out Finland in the gloomy November weather. So.
But it's really nice this morning, I thought.
It's light now, but it wasn't light when you woke up, and it wasn't light when you arrived in Finland, right?
This is true. Yeah, this is true. So basically, we're going to spend the next 30 minutes generally talking about Tag Manager and analytics. First off, do you want to just go into a little bit of detail in terms of what you do?
I'll try.
Yeah, just do a little intro.
So I currently have my own business. We started a company with 4 friends of mine called 8 Be Cheap. We do full stack development work, software development, service development, but we focus on data. So everything we do is somehow related to data, whether it's a data-driven app or it's a analytics pipeline or it's data engineering or it's setting up campaigns, whatever. And we've been doing this for a bit over a year, thoroughly enjoying ourselves. I think our business idea is to deliver top quality service, but also turn this into a lifestyle business. So enjoy what we do and not have regrets and not feel pressured to grow or to expand. So I have a 2.5-year-old kid, and my vision for what I want to do for a living right now is to downshift and focus more on the important stuff.
Amazing.
And professionally, my job revolves around data engineering, data collection, GTM obviously, but a lot of software development as well. So if I'm hired to a client, they expect me to be able to actually do the work, not just write specifications and that kind of stuff. So that takes about, let's say that takes about half of my available time, and the rest is devoted to writing open source code, thinking up cool applications for things that people might need, writing content for my blog, visiting conferences, talking about analytics. So I would consider the things I do professionally more of a hobby, and the things I do as a hobby more of the thing I want to do professionally.
What a great way to be, though.
It is. I'm fairly happy with the status quo. If possible, I would actually like to work even less, but I think that would just not be a good solution in today's economic climate.
Yeah,
but
needs must.
Yeah, exactly.
So your background is you're coming at analytics as a developer, right? So your background is as a JavaScript developer. So your whole approach here is, I guess, when you're talking about analytics, you're talking more about the implementation rather than the analysis side of it, right?
That would be a good way to put it today. Obviously, it's the focus has changed over the years. I have been working as an analytics quote unquote consultant. So I have been working with KPIs and have been working with stakeholders trying to figure out the best way to measure. But and I'm okay. I'm happy to do that work. But for me, it's not where I'm best at. For me, the best place to be is to solve the data collection and processing problem, not the reporting problem. The reporting problem is for people who have the patience to be steered and to steer the whims of the C-level, and I'm not one of those people. I'm too short-tempered for that, and I'm not comfortable on the hand-waving level, the strategic level. I want my feet have to be planted firmly on the ground. I have to have a keyboard in front of me, and I have to be able to code something.
So you are in the detail.
Yes, I'm very much in the detail. So you can't do a good job with data engineering and building unless you have an understanding of the strategic needs. So I'm not saying that I'm excluding myself from the process, But what I am trying to focus on is that I'm going to be the specialist in this multidisciplinary environment. I'm going to be the specialist who comes in with how to collect the data, but I'm going to be working closely with those who figure out what we need to collect and what KPIs we need and so on.
So do you see your remit as making sure that so you have an analyst or a marketing team who need that data to be able to make informed decisions? Are you saying like your remit is making sure they have completely accurate, correct data in order for them to make those decisions?
Well, that's one way to put it. It's definitely like demand based. So the other type of analytics is just collect everything and hope that a demand arises, and that's problematic today, especially with GDPR and data retention laws. So you can't just go willy-nilly collecting whatever you want, because you have a responsibility to only collect the data that is actually needed. But the way you describe it with like an analytics team and a marketing team might, like if that's my purview, like if that's the assignment I'm getting, the first thing I'll do is dismantle that thought and try to build a team where there's an analytics component and a marketing component and a business component and a developer component. So one thing that I've learned over the years is that silos are easy. Like if there's a silo, everything is easy because they have their own budgets. They can always point the fingers at another silo that they screwed it up. We didn't. But I'm trying to figure out the best way to build a software or a service, and I've figured out what others have as well, is that the silos are actually really counterproductive to those. So what we try to do, and the perfect team for me would be one where there's all these different disciplines present. So there's a marketing component, there's somebody from analytics, there's somebody from development, there's business people, there's HR if necessary, whatever. And we build the service together in an agile way. So we constantly reevaluate, where are we now? What kind of data do we need? What about our marketing campaigns? How do we implement this feature from a marketing point of view? Do we need social media coverage? So as long as the environment is agile and we constantly have this dialogue and we're constantly talking about, we want to add, a new single page checkout. Okay, so then the analyst says, okay, so what kind of KPIs do we need? Then the marketing people say, okay, so but what does that mean from experimentation point of view? PPC people maybe think, okay, so now we just have one landing page when we used to have like 5. So the difference between a traditional model is that everything is constantly communicating, everything is transparent. And for me, that's the perfect place, because for me, that means that I don't have to dig around for what did you actually want to collect. I can ask that question directly right there. I can see the KPIs as post-it notes on the whiteboard. So building this is kind of going on tangents already, but building this kind of a agile, healthy environment where I'm not just a data collection person. I'm a part of this heterogeneous team where everybody has an input and all are trying to just build a better service.
I mean, it makes so much sense, but in reality, like, how many organizations have that in place or are open enough to facilitate making that structure happen? Because, I mean, in my experience at least, it's quite rare to have that.
Yeah.
As crazy as it sounds, because it's totally logical.
No, that's a really good question. Like, the problem with agile is that it's super difficult. And the good thing about things like the waterfall model, where you have these discrete stages, you have planning and then implementation and then evaluation. Yeah. It's so much easier because I think people use the metaphor for agile is how a child learns things. So they do stuff. And then they learn about that, and they maybe do the wrong stuff again, but then they learn a bit more. So it's like iterative trial and error kind of process. And it's very difficult to sell anything that has the word error in it. Like, agile has this fail early, fail fast, and learn immediately stuff. So that's a very good point. And certainly, like, not all organizations are mature. So there's two approaches for me on this. I try to turn organizations around, but it's very difficult for a single person or a single team. There has to be incentive or motivation to do it already. So certainly, like, the best possible place for me would be in an organization that already has some kind of an agile workflow. And there's surprisingly many. At least in Finland, we have a nice situation. The whole organization might not be agile, but a single team might. Yeah. And that's how you build it. You make that team have a lot of success, and then you scale it. You show the other teams that, hey, this is what we did.
I mean, this is way beyond just going into a client and fixing their analytics.
And that's the difficult sell. I've been really disenchanted with the consultant paradigm for a long time. I used to work as an SEO consultant as well in the gloomy days, and I'd rather forget those. But it was, and our organization certainly wasn't healthy, because what we did was we did those 2-week auditing and implementation.
And this would be your agency side.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this would
So
be
as
agency
an
side.
SEO
So we would do the whole audit and recommendations, and then churn out a report every month of all the stuff that still needs fixing. And that's just the worst possible way to do it. Like, imagine you're a developer and every month you get this 30-page PDF of things you still haven't fixed. Like, how does that make you do anything?
Yep.
Whereas, let's say if I were now an SEO consultant, what I would do is I would sell myself as one part of the team, maybe 2 days a week, be present there, but in every single daily meeting, every single weekly meeting, whenever they develop a new feature, I would be there to consult them and say that, hey, by the way, if you do that, you're going to need to implement those redirects, and you're going to need to look at those HTTP headers, and you're going to need to figure out how to do that internal linking. So it's constantly part of the process.
Yeah, I guess that example is perfect, isn't it? Because it's like anything, you can put a report on someone's desk, but what's actually going to make a difference in terms of traffic, sales, and everything else is getting something done.
Yeah.
And often a PDF by itself
Precisely.
doesn't really get anything done.
Yeah.
Fascinating. And to go back a little bit
Yep.
to your your blog, right? So one of the reasons I really wanted to come and meet you and have this chat was when I was learning Tag Manager and trying to figure out, okay, how do I collect revenue and put it through the Facebook pixel? Or how do I pull out that value and put that through the Facebook pixel? I would always end up on your blog, always. How did you end up in that position where you've got this blog which is the go-to resource for Tag Manager?
There's this kind of Zen approach that the less I think about the blog, the less I try to do work for the blog, the better it works. I started the blog started as an SEO blog. So this was when I
Oh, really?
Please don't go back all the way back to the May articles of 2013, because they are pretty horrible. But I joined the SEO agency in 2013, and I just wanted to start a blog because I had one of the things that I read was that SEO needs blogging and good content creation. And so I wrote maybe 5 or 6 really bad articles, like run-of-the-mill stuff, like something about search trends and something about the Penguin update, which was hot back then.
Oh, yeah.
And then
Yep.
a couple of articles about digital marketing, which I think were considerably better. But I had been using GTM since it came out of beta, or since it was in beta as a Google Analytics partner. And one of my clients had a very specific demand where they wanted to, I think they specifically asked for what was the weather like when a visitor visits a website. So how do we measure that? So in Google Analytics, you would be able to see that this session came when it was cloudy, and this session was with maybe the idea that, for example, if you're a golf course owner, you can see that are people booking green fees for the next weekend when they know that it's going to be raining, and should you maybe be optimizing against golf simulators and stuff like that if it's a rainy weekend. So there's some it's a long shot, but it's still interesting metadata about the visit. And so I just it turns out with GTM it was very trivial to do. You needed a JavaScript API and some code, and I wrote it and it worked. And then I thought about so how do I this is pretty cool. Should I just keep it for my client? And then I asked the client if it's okay to write this on the blog, and I wrote it on the blog. And that was I'm not sure if that was the first GTM article, but it was probably one of the first ones. But then the Google Analytics social media account retweeted it and shared it in Google Plus, and suddenly it kind of blew up. And or in terms of my traffic back then, which was nothing, it totally hockey sticked. And I got kind of infatuated by that, and I realized that, hey, by the way, this was actually pretty cool. And it wasn't just about the traffic, but it was about the good feeling I got when I thought that I just shared something. I put something back into the community that had given me so much. I had been a huge follower in Google Plus of certain people, and I had been reading the SEO Moz blog for a long time. And then I just started churning out article after article. And of course, Google didn't share every single one of them. just a minority actually, but I just started writing the articles because I found that the growth was steady. And then two things decided the course. The first one was that I decided that I'm never going to do any advertising, never going to do any native advertising, never going to do any mailing list, never going to do any followers, nothing like that. If my ego allowed it, I would remove my name from the blog as well, but it doesn't. Something has to be there still. But I want it to be only about the subject matter. Like no, get my free online course, buy my books, nothing like that. Nothing like that. Just the articles as raw as possible. So that was one thing, and the other thing that decided the course was I adopted this pattern where, because I work with implementation, I have all these interesting problems crop up all the time.
Yeah.
And I spend a lot of time in product forums and communities around GTM helping people out, not just because of altruism, but also because I get all these cool problems that people are having. It's horrible to say a cool problem, but all these interesting problems that people are having. And then I come up with a solution, and the mindset that I adopted was that the first thing I do when I get a solution is draft a blog article about it. So just make it totally automatic in my brain, in my mind, like my brain patterns is that come up with a solution, blog it, like no intermediate steps.
Does it help you in your working out process as well to, okay, I'm going to write this down step by step, document what I've done?
It really does. Because I can't write crap code, for example, because I have to publish it on my blog. So I have to really think about the code quality. I could write, if I didn't care about the public appearance, I could write just whatever code I want and be a lot faster about it.
Yeah.
But now I have to think about code structure. I have to think about documentation, think about how things appear, because what's good for blog readers is also good for the client trying to use the solution.
And do you feel pressure to, say Tag Manager releases a new feature or something comes out, or something changes? There's probably an expectation that, Simo's probably.
Yes,
I need to go there and check it out and see what it's all about. Like, do you feel that pressure? Like, is that a thing, or is that?
No, that's definitely a thing, and that's one of the things that I wish I could get rid of. So I feel a tremendous pressure about being the first. There's absolutely no reason for that. It's silly and it's egotistical and it's totally self-centered. But I feel a pressure. But I think that many people are, like you said, many people are expecting for me to spill the news because they are maybe disenchanted with Google's own documentation.
Yeah.
So there is an expectation, and that creates some undue pressure for me. Luckily, I'm fortunate enough to have been working with GTM and the GTM team for so long that I do have early access. So I have time to kind of draft those big articles so that they're coming, so that when the feature comes out, I actually just hit publish and that's it.
Great. And so you've I guess you've developed a pretty good relationship with that team.
I like to think so. Yeah. I give them a lot of feedback and they help me out a lot with my content. So I think it's a good situation for both. And obviously, I mean, I don't get and I don't want any recognition, but I spend countless hours in the communities, just helping people out because of what I said earlier. Is I'm digging for content and also trying to just make the platforms more approachable. So I like to think that there's a good relationship between myself and Google.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's definitely helped me out.
Yeah, that's already a big win in my book.
And kind of what sort of challenges do you find most common? So, I mean, just even within my experience of working with different clients and going into a new client and looking at their pixel implementation or looking at the analytics implementation, it's always in a slightly different, it's never the same. There are always different problems. It's never really perfect. There's always some work to do. Like, what are the real common issues that you find that come up time and time again, or is it the case that everyone's in a completely different position?
Well, I mean, typically when you get a new container in front of your eyes, it has all the usual suspects. So it has the Google Analytics tracking code, and then it has the tags. It has the Facebook pixel maybe, and maybe some advertising. There's always optimization opportunities. Like a lot of people still write a lot of custom code when they needn't. So they write really complex, or they don't know it's complex, but because they copy paste it from Stack Overflow or from my
From
blog
your
or something.
site, yeah.
So the rule of thumb for GTM, in my view, and this has developed over the years, but the rule of thumb is to write as little code as possible. So try to replace all custom code with the native stuff, native triggers, GTM released custom templates this May or this spring, which let you kind of replace custom code with a native interface. So fields and all this kind of stuff.
Got you.
So the reason because earlier custom code was the coolest. Like you could do anything. Like the weather thing was all custom.
Such a cool example.
You could do whatever you want with custom code. Hell, you could, you can query the stock market. You can listen for all different types of interactions on the page. But as it turns out, you can also create a blank page, and you can also have the page with infinitely looping. And so the problem with custom code is that it used to be a differentiating factor for GTM because you could do all this cool stuff without having to go through the dev process.
Yep.
But the more I've learned, and this ties back to the perfect team we were talking about and the silos, it's not necessarily a good thing to do this stuff behind the dev's back,
Yeah. Do you think people get caught up a little bit with the new shiny stuff and, okay, I'm going to try and do something really fancy because I find it interesting, rather than actually working back from the business need or the team's need?
There's definitely some of that, and for that, it's definitely like my blog and some of the other blogs are to blame, because they do tell you that you can do all this cool stuff, but they never have the disclaimer, but you should only do it if you actually have a business question for that.
Yeah. Well, I guess when it's with everything, like you have to put your own situational judgment on it to figure out what's needed and what's not.
But I'm really happy for the people who write comments on my blogs, because I do get called out about it quite often. So if I do like I did this article way back when about custom engagement. So every 15 seconds it sends like a pulse to GTM to GA that says that this person has been active for 7 seconds, and then it calculates your total active time, like Chartbeat does, and which I think is still like a really valuable solution for publishers, because they can GA misrepresents time on page. It's just the time between two page views. It doesn't tell you if the user is actually actively viewing the document.
Yeah.
So this solution gives you kind of an active time. But the problem is that it sends an event every 15 seconds. So if the user is on the site for a long time, they'll blow past the 500 hits per session limit.
Got you.
So I was called out on that and said that, hey, by the way, this does create a lot of event pollution. So I think I did add a disclaimer that please only do this if you, first of all, only do this for a short time, and then only do this for those pages that you want to measure. Don't put it across your entire site, because you'll be getting a lot of useless data.
I guess that this particular use case, so basically what I'm trying to work out in my head here, so you're saying basically instead of time on site, which isn't a perfect metric
By far.
You're putting these regular events in to measure activity. And is that activity a scroll or a click or some form of interaction with the browser?
Yeah. So the way it works is, this is actually almost directly taken from how Chartbeat did their research. So Chartbeat is this tool that tells publishers how many active users are there currently on the site. Mm-hmm. So the way it works, or the algorithm, is that every time you move the mouse, you click, you press keys on the keyboard, you scroll, any type of like active agent interaction, it sets you off as non-idle. And as soon as there's been 5 seconds that you haven't done one of these things, it sets you as idle. Mm-hmm. And then every 15 seconds, so the 15 seconds is just an arbitrary number. It could be like every time the user leaves the page or whatever, it sends an event to GA that says how much active time out of those 15 seconds the user had. And then it calculates an aggregate sum, so you'll know that on my long form content, for example, the typical active time per page is maybe 7 minutes. And GA reports time on page as 34 minutes or something, because it just measures the time between two page views. So this really takes into account a number of factors around how the user interacts with the page.
It's so smart.
It's smartish.
It has
some problems. For example, with mobile, Obviously, the screen is much smaller, so it has a more granular measure of activity, so it's easier to be active on mobile. But the other problem is that on mobile, you'll really only have the scroll. You don't really touch and click and press keys on the keyboard for fun. You don't doodle, basically. And then the other problem is the event spam. So the reason I chose every 15 seconds was simply because I want to extend the session. So as long as I send a hit every 15 seconds, it doesn't expire the session. So the alternative, which would save a lot of hits, would be to just send the event, for example, once every 30 minutes, which is the session timeout time, and once when the user leaves the page. But there's enough problems with both that it creates a lot of event-only sessions in GA. So sessions that have no page view, only those engagement events.
But I guess that's something you could, again, it's that, I guess it's going, right, that's a really interesting thing. How can I use it best?
Yeah.
And maybe, split testing a new landing page or, just putting it on those pages, collecting enough data and then removing it to, I guess it's finding the best and most appropriate use case, right?
Absolutely, and that's a really good way to put it, because there's no one size fits all. So it's almost by necessity is going to be a bit too broad for anyone. So then everybody just needs to look at the data critically, and that's a problem. So providing a solution does not entail that it's going to be looked at critically. They're just going to put it on their site and then wonder about, hey, why do I have this weird number here and why do I have this weird number here?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess it's understanding the potential side effects or
people, my recommendation to people doing this stuff is to just really be critical. Like it's cool to set these things up, and that's totally fine. I wouldn't write those blogs if I didn't think that they're okay to set up. But then be critical about that data and only have it running for as long as it serves a purpose, and just don't leave it running, because it's like what would be a non-controversial analogy? It's like little kids with weird food. So it's like the health department has said that this food is okay to eat, and this food is okay to eat, and this food is okay to eat, but they don't necessarily know what happens if you eat all of them together.
Yeah.
So I was going to say vaccinations as another, but that would be too of a hot topic.
Let's not go there.
But so the thing is that you can run all these scripts concurrently on the site, but the cumulative effect of all of them running at the same time might be something that we haven't anticipated. So there might be performance issues. There might be problems where you're adding listeners to, multiple listeners to single elements. Which brings us back to why this custom code is harmful, is that GTM has no built-in process to optimize it. It's just code that you write and you publish, and then it's there. If you use the templating options, then that code is always optimized, and GTM takes responsibility that if it breaks, we'll fix it because it's a native template. With custom code, it's like you've broken the SLA. We don't,
right.
You're on your own.
Yeah.
So that's why I think, especially for large organizations with large web properties and app properties, it's really important to include the developers, because they understand this stuff. Usually, they can tell you that, hey, adding that jQuery script is not going to work because we don't have jQuery on this site, which is one of the most common problems. Or adding all those scripts together will create a huge performance problem. So let's just talk about this, figure out. So that's why we want the agile team.
So it just always comes back to avoiding those silos, I guess.
It always comes back to having a communication structure. So even silos can be okay if communication isn't restricted to them. So it's the Conway's law is something that I believe this computer scientist Mel Conway wrote, that every single computer system or any kind of digital system mirrors the communication structures that built that system. So if the two engineers did not talk to each other, then the components they operate will not communicate either. And it's the same thing in digital marketing and analytics. If my team refuses to talk with your team, then any kind of integration we need between our teams will be mirror those failures as well.
Yeah.
So we need to, it all goes back to communication. It doesn't have to be agile. It can be silos. It can be waterfall, whatever. But as long as people communicate constantly and transparently, that's what fixes it.
Yeah, it's fascinating and super interesting to kind of talk about analytics and talk about all of this stuff, but actually it just comes back to there's a task needed.
Yeah.
Something's needed, and the right people in the right room.
And imagine, I'm the irony. I'm from Finland, which is like known that people don't talk.
You're quite chatty for a Finn, I'd say.
I must have some weird blood in me, but that's the irony. Like, and it is a reality. Like many of our projects are difficult because of those communication boundaries. But it is a kind of an outdated stereotype as well, especially with the younger generation. Like there's a lot of people are willing to communicate. I think the breaking the ice is the difficult part, because the small talk component in Finland is kind of an abstract thing. It doesn't really exist. So the ice has to be broken some other way. And typically in Finnish teams, the way to start communication flowing is to show that you're trustworthy and you're doing a good job. So being professional is how to get those things working.
That's quite nice in a way, though. Like earning.
Yeah.
It's like almost like you earn the right to, or earn the respect.
Yes, we're like a democratic, and in that way we're a very democratic nation, is that there is no inherited power, or there's no inherent power. So we don't have your monarchs here to with God-given rights. You actually have to earn them through hard work and toiling.
Fantastic. Well, look, that was, I mean, all like this, super interesting chatting about everything here. And I guess just to wrap up, let's say there's an organization or a team, they think they have an analytics problem. Maybe the data's not coming through correctly, or they have a challenge that they need to solve. Where should people start? Like, what's the first thing people should do when they want to kind of improve their analytics?
Okay. So the first thing is that if you think you have an analytics problem, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, you don't have an analytics problem, you have a communication problem. So if the data isn't coming through, it's because something wasn't communicated correctly. Specifications weren't shared correctly, and but let's skip that and let's go to the details. So if you have a data problem, then obviously the first thing to look at is all the parts of the data pipeline, starting from collection. So if you don't have, let's say you don't have your revenue coming through anymore, well, then you have to reproduce the problem. It's an engineering approach, so always reproduce first and then fix. So it's impossible to fix something you can't reproduce. Mm-hmm. So you have to try to reproduce that problem, do some test transactions. Again, discuss with your developers, because it might be something that the site itself is no longer producing, typically like a broken data layer.
Or something changed.
Yeah, exactly. And there are ways to mitigate that in the future. So, and this goes to the developer paradigm a little, but for example, if data layer is a critical component, if you need it to produce e-commerce data, you can write, and you should write, automated tests. And this is for the developers out there. You can and should include the data layer in those tests. So whenever a new build of the site is released, the build will not compile, the build will not be ready if the e-commerce data isn't in the data layer anymore. So having that kind of a automated like oil gate in front of there, preventing from bad stuff from leaking through, is really important. But then it might not be in the data collection part at all. It might be in GTM, where you've broken a mapping, you've broken a tag, you published a version of the container that just didn't work. So then you have to, of course, audit GTM as well. Then it might not be in GTM. It might be because of errant view filter in GA. So then you have to look at the filters as well. What you basically need is a list that you constantly develop, and a checklist. It's not something you write today and then never change again, but it's something that you constantly reevaluate. How do I, fix these issues? And once you have that list, and once you curate that and follow it diligently day in, day out, it will become second nature. And then the super important one, bringing us back to the original topic of this discussion, is you share that information with the team, so that if you're incapacitated or leave the company, everything doesn't just drop, but everybody understands that analytics has these different steps.
Yeah.
It's surprisingly often that the developers will create a data layer, but they don't understand for what. They're just told to create a data layer.
Yeah.
But what if they were told and included in the process, so that they understand that the data layer is just the first part? Then you have the GTM mappings, then you have the GA filters, then you have the data studio reports. If they understand that entire process as well, because you are transparently communicating it to them in every single daily and weekly meeting, it's by magic how those problems disappear. It's crazy how a bit of effort into the communication will make those trivial problems that never should have cropped up in the first place. If data stops coming, it's the stupidest problem in the world, because if the data came at one point and now it doesn't come anymore, the difference between those two is always just one single thing that was broken.
Yep.
That could have been prevented by the simplest communicative and cooperative efforts. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and how rare is that
Exactly.
channel of communication open? So
because communication is difficult. You have to actually talk to other people, and it's nasty. That's the problem. This is the Finnish me talking about. No, but that's just it. I mean, you don't. Communication kind of is predicated by some kind of vulnerability, and I think people are hesitant to admit that they need to be transparent, because you seem more professional if you keep things close to your chest. That's just how it is.
Pride.
It's pride, and it's appearances, and unfortunately none of those have any place in an agile organization. You have to let go of those things. You have to let go of any kind of you can still be the specialist, but you're one of the specialists. You're no longer the man or the woman in the house. It's difficult.
Yeah, and it's, look, that is just such a good point and applies to so many different things. So yeah, look, absolutely fascinating, and thank you so much. And didn't expect to go so far down the communication route, but it just, everything you've said makes so much sense for solving analytics issues or any other real.
And this is where all the listeners who wanted to hear all about GTM stuff are going to be like really disappointed that we didn't tune in for this BS.
Well, they can go and look at your blog, right?
That's true. I can just say that this is, this is for me the far more interesting. Like GTM is lovely. It's a wonderful tool, and I wouldn't keep working with it if I didn't have this affection towards it. But when where it all boils down to is these questions about organizations and transparency and honesty and all these human traits that are so devoid in modern organizations, and especially with like agency brand relationships. I think it's a far more interesting challenge, and because I also know that it's a huge investment upfront. Like communication costs a lot, and there's no ROI immediately in sight. But I have so much anecdotal evidence now that the amount of like little fixes that it does is just mind-blowing. Like the amount of those small problems that used to irritate you, the way that they just disappear.
Yep.
It's amazing. Like it's a restorative process, and it's the closest thing to organizational therapy I know of, and that might actually be a good thing to steer towards in my professional lifetime. Think about like therapy sessions for teams. Interesting.
Maybe maybe next year.
Yeah, maybe. Absolutely.
Well, we've found a new direction for you.
Yes, this was a perfect way to.
Amazing. Well, look, thank you so much. That was brilliant.
Thank you.
And
thanks, John.
Yeah, hope everyone's enjoyed this. If you do, please subscribe, give it a share, and we'll see you next time.